G'day, everyone. Welcome to another Toon Under podcast, the Southern Hemisphere's biggest and best podcast. All things Newcastle United. Today, we're going to talk about our big clash against Nottingham Forest at the City Ground this weekend. A nice 5:30 p.m. kickoff there in the UK. Unfortunately, it's a stinky 4:30 a.m. kickoff for us here in Melbourne and Sydney. So that's going to be an absolute grim Sunday for me and you, Dimi. But today, we're back. We've got a special guest finally. We've got our guests back with the schedule sort of getting back to one a week. We can organise this sort of stuff, which we love. So we've joined today by Jamie Martin. He's a Nottingham Forest fan. He works for the Nottingham Sport newspaper. And if you're unlucky enough to be in a hospital, you can hear him on the Nottingham Hospital radio as well, calling all the games. Jay, how you going, mate?
I'm all good, thank you. I'm all good. Not too bad. How are you guys?
We're good. We're good. Another beautiful day in the world's most livable city here, Dimi.
Absolutely, mate. It was an absolute corker today.
Sunny 25. I thought it was about 25.
25.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe down your way,
6,
25.
It's like 6 degrees
22.
here. It's 6 degrees and raining.
Awful.
We are in the middle of summer. We are in the middle of summer.
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't follow, Nottingham Forest punched their ticket into the fifth round of the FA Cup last night. Jay, you had a bit of a late one because you got stuck with extra time and penalties against Bristol City. So how are you feeling this morning, mate?
Yeah, I mean, my eyes are a little bit dry. I'm not going to lie, but it was just, as I was saying to you in the pre-chat, it was just like getting there, already a little bit tired from the day, and like, just please don't go to penalties. Get the win, or just get anything. Just get the win, and then let me go home. Do you know what I mean? But no, extra time. Nothing, penalties eventually. So yeah, it was a fun one, and I always enjoy penalties. But Forest haven't lost in a penalty shootout since the 90s, so we've got a pretty good record.
So you'd be the opposite of everyone else. I think everyone assumes their team's going to lose when it goes to penalties, but you'd have some unnerving confidence that you're going to get through.
Yeah, I mean every penalty shootout that I've been to, we've won. So the playoff semi-finals against Sheffield United, the one against Wolves last season. So. There's only 3 that I've really been to there that I can remember. So
they all count.
It's a good record, though. 3 in a row. Why not?
Absolutely. So I guess before we get started, or I think it's good to start at the start. So tell us a bit about yourself and how you sort of fell into supporting Nottingham Forest.
I support them because my dad supports them, and that's the way I think that a lot of people get into football. Your dad or your mum supports a football team. Your dad brings you down to the games, and then eventually you kind of just fall in love with it. And it took me a while. I didn't like football till I was 7. I was adamant. I said it was rubbish. Watching football with my dad on a Saturday, Sunday afternoon was rubbish. It's my least favourite thing in the world. I used to go home telling my mum I hate being at my dad's watching football. But then over time, it kind of grew on me a little bit. He took me to go and play football on Saturday, and then he'd go and take me to a Forest match after. And eventually I started to enjoy it. So I used to leave it at half time because I hated football that much, and then eventually I got to the full 90 minutes, and now it's my job. So it's things do change, but Forest is just the club I've loved, and when I started loving them, they weren't particularly easy to love, but it's and they never will because it's Forest. But I just love it. I love everything about it. It's a special club on the on the banks of the Trent. It's just there's nowhere like it.
Yes, awesome. So what are a couple of your favourite memories sort of over the time since you've been supporting that you can remember anyway?
I mean, I think like even before we got up to the Premier League, which is obviously the massive one, and I don't think any Forest fan can deny that. For someone, I'm only 18, so what we've got to remember in the last 18 years is pretty limited. That we've been a pretty poor performing club for the last 18 years or so until the last 3 years. But beating Arsenal in the cup maybe 4 or 5 years ago was really special because at that time, you kind of got a bit of belief and got excited for the season. And then games where you're looking to maybe get promotion, but you kind of miss out at the last minute were always heartbreaking. But it was the start of something slowly building up towards what we've got now in terms of going to the Premier League. So the big memory, of course, is Wembley, getting to the Premier League, just the realization that your team's back in the in the top division, which I've never seen in my life. And I'm sure you guys will feel the same because obviously Newcastle were relegated not really that long ago, and you guys got back to the top division, and what a great feeling that is. And for us, 23 years outside the Premier League, or the top division as it was called then, it was a real special moment. So for me, Wembley, of course, the big memory.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So I guess we'll get stuck into it. So we're 23 games into the season. How have you assessed Nottingham Forest season so far?
It's been ups and downs, really. I think that we started off okay. You know, we got a couple of good wins. Beating Chelsea was a pretty good one, to be honest. You know, away at Stamford Bridge, given the spending that they did in the summer, we all thought it was going to be a really tough game, and it was to an extent. But Forest beat them, and there was a good element of belief there. But after that, obviously, things for Steve Cooper didn't quite go as well as he wanted it to. You know, a couple of good results, but you know, it just wasn't enough to save him. You know, beating Aston Villa was a great one. But after that, just not good enough, really. And Nuno's come in, beat United, beat Newcastle, as I'm sure you guys are aware. Chris Wood. I won't go any further with that anyway. But
What a prick.
Yeah, he's missing the next game. You'll be pleased to know. So you can celebrate that. But no, it's been up and down. We've had a real lows when Steve Cooper left. It was a real sad time because he really kept the club together, and he kept the magic of the club around, and I think that Nuno has definitely done that as well. He's, you know, and credit to him. It's tough when a fan base loves a manager so much, and then a new guy comes in. People still don't really want that new guy, and in a weird way, they kind of want the old guy back in Steve Cooper. But everyone's behind Nuno now, winning the cup, you know, and kind of get rid of those worries of maybe exiting the cup. And then, you know, the two good wins that I mentioned previously. Draw against Bournemouth. I'd say we're starting to get on the right track. There's still things we need to improve on, but overall it's been okay. But I wouldn't say a major upgrade on last season, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So just on Steve Cooper, it's a really interesting point, and I wouldn't say it's a touchy subject, but it's a very, I guess it's a really big not a big discussion point, but it's a really interesting discussion point. Like, how much do you sort of attach yourself to, like you said, a manager who's done so much and sort of connected everyone, the fans and the players and all that sort of stuff. But look, did that sort of goodwill hamper them a little bit, I guess, because he sort of maybe stayed on for a few games longer than perhaps he should have because of that goodwill and things like that? Or do you think it kind of that it played itself out and then whatever happened?
I mean, I'll always have the most respect for Steve Cooper. So, you know, first of all, he gave me the opportunity to do what I do in a way, because there's so many things that would not have happened for me if Forest didn't get to the Premier League. You know, so there's benefits from a personal perspective and a professional perspective where I say thank you to Steve Cooper for that. You know, and the spotlight that it puts on people that have been working hard in content creation for Forest, and there's people that have been working in it longer than me that are finally getting the recognition they deserve now, Forest are in the Premier League. So Steve Cooper can be thanked for that off the pitch, really, as a completely separate point. But, you know, he changed the way the club was, you know, a club that didn't have hope, a club that was, you know, constantly fearing relegation and, you know, just in a real state of disillusion for a lot of it. And Steve Cooper came in, you know, cemented over the cracks a little bit and brought in a bit of stability. So, you know, for me, it was really special that he was our manager and he did so much. And again, creating that stability, giving us reasons to hope. I had the privilege of speaking to Steve Cooper before most games, and he was just such a lovely, wonderful person, more importantly, you know, because obviously there's so many great coaches out there, but do you get to see the person side of them? I don't really know. But Steve Cooper, you did. You always saw it, even if you didn't speak to him in person through his press conferences. He was a very easy person to get along with, easy person to talk with, and he knew his stuff. And unfortunately, it didn't work out in the end for Forest. And I'm a firm believer that there's some managers that can only take a club so far, and there's no shame in it. There's no shame in it, you know. And I think that it's like Gary O'Neill with Bournemouth. I think for me, keeping them out of the relegation area, and that's probably what he could do with that club. Not to say he won't go and do better with another, because I think Steve Cooper will go to another club and take them further than what he took Forest, Crystal Palace maybe. You know, so I just think he took us as far as he could. Yeah, I do think he had a couple of games too many, if I'm honest with you. And maybe I think fans, and certainly I, was blinded by sentiment a little bit. But the owner gave him a lot of chances. The owner definitely held on for a long time, in fairness to him, and gave him a lot of chances, maybe when he shouldn't have. But Cooper's earned a lot of respect. He's earned the right to a bit of sentimentality, to be honest. But yeah, a couple of games too many, but no hard feelings. Great manager, and there's some that still wanted to see him in the dugout now.
Yeah. Dimi, how would you look at their season from an outsider looking in?
It's interesting because you look I seem to see every transfer window they're signing about 10 to 12 players. And I remember before last season, I'm going to keep mentioning it. I was at that first game last year when we played Forest at St James's, and I remember just going.
Can I just stop you? Just Jamie, just to keep you in the loop with everything that's happening. When Dimi says he went to the first game of last season, he was actually on his honeymoon in Greece, and left his wife in Greece to go and attend the game, and then went back to her.
No,
in
are
Greece.
You serious?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So just to keep you in the loop, and any new subscribers or listeners as well, that's what's happened.
To give you the sort of the quick background. So obviously we're in Greece for our honeymoon, and I left Greece. I suggested it to the missus, saying, "Look, I'm close to England. I'm about 4 hours away. It's game 1 of the season. I want to go." Didn't really ask. I sort of said, "Look, I'm going." I ended up getting tickets in the ballot, which was obviously lucky. And then I ended up getting a flight from Greece Friday night into Newcastle. Saw the game Saturday afternoon, then flew back from London Sunday morning back to Greece. So I was really in England for a little under 48 hours. So she didn't miss that much, and I got to see the game, and we won 2-0, and it was a wonderful experience. But yeah, that's
still happily married.
I'm still happily married, which is
somehow. Jeez, I don't know how you've been letting away with that.
Wow. Clearly, she knew what she was signing up for when she married me, and she knew what my sort of nut job tendencies. But yeah, so obviously, and remember that game, there was about 12 new players in the Forest squad, and just going through the team, I'm thinking, how is this team going to be cohesive enough to survive last year? They did a great job to survive, and this season, it seems like you've signed players as well. And even in the recent transfer window, there's 2 or 3 new players coming through. So there's been a lot of transition, but I think Forest under Nuno, they've changed the way they're playing a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, but you look a little bit more dangerous for me, and a bit more, you've got a bit more about you. I'm not sure what it is. It could be the players that just, Alanga seems to, against us, he ripped us a new one, and Gibbs White obviously can play as well. So there seems to be a bit more positivity on the ball and a bit more confidence with the way you're playing. Maybe it's the respect that Nuno has, maybe because he's been doing it a bit longer than Cooper was in the Premier League. Maybe that played a part. But yeah, I think Forest definitely have enough to stay up, especially with some of the teams in the league this year. It's just the awkward part of, and obviously Jay can elaborate, the awkward part of integrating so many new players so often, how that's going to affect the chemistry of the team and how they're going to be used.
Well, I mean, it must be said that Forest came up with 5 or 6 loan players, that were in the first team. So, you take those out of the equation, you lose half your team there straight away. And then as well, the depth is from that team. I mean, Forest were incredibly lucky in that playoff season to have had the little injury issues that they had, because if they had serious injury problems, they wouldn't have gone up. The depth wasn't enough in that squad to have sustained the momentum that they had. So they got very lucky, but I think they deserved a bit of luck after how the last few years have been, to be honest. But it was a team built on players that weren't ours, and a team that didn't really have enough depth for the Premier League. And some people use the term that we went up a year too soon. I don't know about that. I'm always a firm believer in just go for it. And Forest did. So in the summer, they had to sign a lot of players, and they did go a little bit overboard with it, I'll be honest with you. And 30 signings or whatever, it's just an unprecedented amount of signings. But when you look at the amount of outgoings that they had earlier in that season, particularly in that depth area, the amount of signings, maybe the 20 or so signings, as strange as it would be to say, is kind of warranted, because you had to build a whole new first team, you had to build a whole new bench, and credit really to Forest, because they spent an average of like £3 or £4 million per player. I can understand why, from every outsider's perspective, 30 signings, you're absolutely mental. But if you look at the deeper context of it, again, there was some bad recruitment during that time. There was also some good recruitment and necessary recruitment. That team stayed up, by the way, and Forest had to build a brand new team, because that Championship side that they had, they couldn't keep together. So, a lot of signings, but the necessary part of it is that Forest, they built a team from scratch, because they couldn't do what they did in the Championship with those players. And a lot of them as well didn't want to come back to Forest, or Forest didn't make an offer. Your likes of Jed Spence and Philip Zinkernagel, for example, he left after. So it is what it is, really. But now is the time where Forest can have a clean slate. I'd like to say that they've reset and they've got a brand new team that they can work on for a few years now. And I don't think we'll see anything like that ever again, or at least I hope not.
Yeah. Well, I did, believe it or not, Dimi, I did do a little bit of research this week knowing that Jamie was going to come on. So I wanted to try and make myself a little bit smarter than what I really am. So there's been over 40 players signed over the last 3 windows, which is, like you said, absolutely extraordinary for anyone to have to do that. And it's not, I understand it wasn't a case of a want, it was more of a need. Like, we need to sign these players to sort of get ourselves a squad, which kind of leads us to our next sort of talking point, I guess, is the FFP charges. It was a little over, I guess, 3 weeks ago that the news came out that Forest and Everton were both found guilty, well, not found guilty, but were charged for breaching FFP laws or rules or whatever you want to call them. So from what I understand, a decision needs to be made by April the 12th. So we should get a bit of clarity before then. Then the club has 7 days to decide if they're going to appeal or not. But the appeal must be concluded by May the 23rd, which is unfortunately 5 days after the league actually finishes, which could be a complete shit show at the end of the season. So we'll dive into that. How do you feel about that? Like, you're pretty well versed in all things Nottingham Forest. Are they sort of sustainable charges, or do you think the club will kind of get away out of it and won't sort of cop the points deduction what Everton copped earlier this season?
I mean, they've hired the best lawyer for it, Nick DeMarco. So
DeMarco.
We love Nick, don't we? Do
yeah. Oh, I know you guys love Nick because he's the one that got your ownership.
Yes, he did.
Through. So Nick knows his stuff. He's a great sports lawyer. Worked with one of our fullbacks, Harry Toffolo, during his betting scandal, which allowed him to have a suspended sentence and continue to play. So, look, Nick DeMarco is a fantastic sports lawyer. The club have trust in him. The club believe that they have a good argument, and their argument is, well, from what I can tell, that they tried to sell Brennan Johnson for more money in order to become a more profitable and sustainable business.
Yeah. So they knocked back a £35 million bid, didn't they, earlier on, and then ended up selling it for 50 to Tottenham. Is that right?
Yeah. So you've got a 10, 15 million pound extra sum on top of that, which is massive. And I see the two sides where people go, yeah, but you should have just sold for 35 million because that's the rules and you've got to stick within that. And in that case, I go, fair enough. But the other side of it, you go, so how come it is the smaller teams that are forced to do that? Why don't the bigger teams have to go and, well, you now have to sell this player because you have to satisfy this in June? They don't have to do that because their revenue streams are significantly bigger. So they're looking at changing the rules in the summer. So what Forest and Everton are being charged for probably won't be the case for other teams next season. That's ridiculous for me. Yeah, ridiculous. And I get that rules are rules, and honestly, if Forest have breached them, you've got to punish them. And I'm not against that. That's the rules, and I subscribe to the rules of the game, because if another team did it and it impacted Forest negatively, I'd want them to have some sort of punishment. So it's only fair. But at the same time, are we encouraging teams to be profitable and sustainable? I'm not too sure, because the Forest told the Premier League that whole time that Brennan Johnson is the guy that we're going to sell, that he's worth a lot of money. Tottenham are probably going to come in with a bid worth, 10 million pound more. Premier League knew about it. Forest sold him later, and now they're trying to backdate it. Whether they can backdate it or not to June books for the previous FFP period, I don't know. I really hope they can, and I really hope that they can argue the case and we get let off with it. But do I see it? I'm really not sure. And at the end of the day, why it happens in April or May, as you say, 5 days after the season's ended, I just think it's crazy. It's bonkers.
It's mental.
It's genuinely bonkers, and it's going to change the way that the Premier League is played in future seasons. You can already tell, because this January window has been the most boring, rubbish window ever. You guys know that. There's some signings that I really wanted to see you guys make, because your depth problems are really concerning, and your injury issues are extensive. So there's a lot of scrutiny around, and if there's anything to learn by this, and if Forest are charged, I still do want to see change, and see the bigger clubs have more restriction, because, as you say, even you guys, even with your Champions League journey and that you've been on, you will probably be having to sell players very soon, to fund transfer windows.
We definitely,
crazy.
we definitely have to, and that's exactly the reason why that nothing really happened for us in January, because we're at the point where we kind of need to sell to buy, and just reversing a bit on what you said, the whole ecosystem is the mid to lower clubs have a really valuable asset, and in order for them to try and compete in the league, they have to sell that asset to one of the big six clubs, because they've got the money to buy that asset. When you think of, say, like a Jack Grealish, or even like a Richarlison at Tottenham, and who else Declan Rice, like these teams have to sell their best player in order to try and compete. Like, it makes no sense at all. Like, absolutely no sense. And it seems like it's just a vehicle to maintain sort of the status quo amongst the top six clubs. It's really hard for any team sort of outside that area to break into it. And then factor the new fair market sponsorship value rules that they've conveniently brought in for this season as well, which sort of handcuffs your ability to bring in revenue so you can try and buy more players. It seems like a really close shop, and for everyone outside the big six.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd just say, are you encouraging clubs to be profitable and sustainable, or are you encouraging smaller clubs not to spend as much, have a weaker competitive advantage, and to stop clubs doing similar to what Newcastle did, stop clubs like Aston Villa doing what they did? You know, keep that top six as it should be, according to them. And, you know, look, the CEO of the Premier League calling Forest and Everton small clubs, for me, says enough about the respect towards clubs in this league. You know, and I look, I'm all about, if someone makes a slip of the tongue and they say something they don't mean, I understand it, but it's very convenient that you use the term small clubs when talking about Forest and Everton, and rightfully so. We're outraged by it, and I do think it should be looked at when defending our case, because if that is the respect that top level officials have for clubs in this division, then there's big concern over who's running it. And for me, you know, I'm not just angry at FFP because Forest have been dropped in it. I'm angry overall, and have been before, because at the end of the day, it's weakening the wrong teams, and it's strengthening the wrong teams. You know, so it's a concern. It's got to be looked at. But at the end of the day, cards you've been dealt, play them, get on with it. Just got to pick up points.
Yeah, that's it. And that's, like I said, Dimi, we've had our own. I wouldn't say there've been problems, have they? But we've had our own sort of hurdles placed in front of us, so we can't sort of be as good as we want to be and be the best club we can be.
Yeah, well, the thing that I don't understand with our situation is we had an owner who owned Sports Direct. I'm not even going to say his name, but he owned Sports Direct, and he didn't plow a cent for that sponsorship into the club for a good 15 years. So what's the difference about them saying fair market value? We didn't get a fair market value with Sports Direct all over our stadium and all over our club shops and everywhere. We didn't get any money out of that. $0 for 15 years or whatever he ownership that bloke had. So, I mean, yeah, Jamie's right. It's ridiculous that they're targeting it. They sort of want to say, look, we're happy for you guys to spend some money here and there, but as soon as you get a player that's any good, or you've spent a little bit too much money, you've got to get rid of that player, and then you cannot spend for however many years, because the top six clubs are so precious about their status in the Premier League. And you saw it with the Super League talk when a lot of them wanted to join the Super League and sort of get away from the Premier League as well. So they've got their own sort of tickets on themselves from that perspective. And I mean, with the money that we have, I know Forest don't have the money that we do, but with the money that we've got coming from PIF, for our owners to see that we can't even, that they've got billions of dollars, and they're sitting there saying we can't even use our money. What kind of investment or business is this? We've got all this money sitting there, but we can't use it because of these antiquated rules that haven't been updated with any sort of consistency in the last 10 to 12 years. And conveniently, clubs like Everton and Forest are being targeted, but Manchester City
trying to compete.
But Manchester City is sitting there with over 100 charges, but because they've confused the shit out of the Premier League with all these charges, they've just bamboozled them and sort of dragging them out. And I've got no doubt that Manchester City will somehow get off or get with a slap on the wrist and won't cop any sort of points penalty or trophy, penalty, or anything like that, and they'll just ride off into the wind because of who they are. So it's a shit show, like Jay said, and hopefully the rules get changed and resolved, and they're not being targeted against these clubs just trying to compete and just trying to make their way up the Premier League, which is every team's right. I mean, if the Premier League don't want teams to compete, you might as well just close up shop, take the 6 teams out of the Premier League. They can go start their own Super League and let everyone else in England compete against themselves, and let's see who the best team is, because at the moment it seems like there's one league for the 6 and then one league for everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't want to get too. We could talk about this for hours and hours, I'm sure, but I was going to say, unfortunately, maybe for us, unfortunately, we've got a game this weekend that we sort of need to talk about as well. So, Jay, I'll bring your lineup up, mate. What you've sent through to us. So, having seen the game this morning with Origi back from injury as well, would he be the one you probably start up front? Do you think?
No. I think that the only change I'd make to this team that's in front of me, if I'd probably make 2 changes, to be fair to you. I think that was my cup team. So this is the team I'd like to see against Newcastle. Instead of Lacademos, I'd have the new goalkeeper, Matt South, who you guys will know.
I was gonna bring him up and seeing if he was ready to play this weekend.
So he'll be ready to play. He couldn't play in the Bristol City tie. Kouyate comes out in the midfield for me because I just think he's too big. You know, he's just too big, and he's not really fast enough. And we need a player that's really fast on the ball. So I think for me, I'm going to put Dominguez in there. I'm going to take Danilo out as well and put Ryan Yates in. Tavares, I think I'll give him another chance at left back. He did okay last night. And I'd maybe, I think I'd keep the team like that other than that. So Kouyate, Danilo and Vlachodimos coming out, and South, Dominguez and Yates going in. I don't think I really need too many more changes, but obviously it's fitness depending. You know, a lot of these guys have just come back. Gibbs White's just come back. Ilanga's just come back. Awonyi. So you got to take it easy, really. So
what was the lineup last night? Was it a pretty strong lineup against Bristol in the FA Cup?
Yeah, so they had Montiel as your right wing back, Omobamidele, Niakate and Felipe as your defenders, and Harry Toffolo on the left. Kouyate and Danilo as your midfield. Gibbs White, Ilanga and Origi as your kind of front 3 guys. So it was all right. It was a little bit different. I think with the back 5, the wing backs kind of allowed for a bit more of more attacking option. But whether Forest really used them as well as they could have, I'm not too sure. I think that they're a bit wasteful at times with the passing. But again, that change in midfielders that I mentioned, I think would make a massive difference. So that's why I changed those personnel. Yeah, right. So we've travelled to the City Ground 11 times during the Premier League era. We've won 3, lost 5, drawn 3. Dimi, our last couple of trips have been memorable, but for a lot of the wrong reasons, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, last year's was obviously a great one for us with that last-minute penalty, but there was that controversial disallowed goal where we thought Elliot Anderson robbed of his moment of his first Premier League goal, and he still hasn't got his first Premier League goal. He's injured now, so that was unfortunate. But yeah, it was the ice core big dog Isaac scored the double, but unfortunately for us, I don't think he's going to be there this weekend. No. But it is a tough ground to go. I remember a game we played against them in the Championship where I think Henry Lanesbury. The Henry Lanesbury special. Yeah. That's the one. We got 2 red cards.
Oh, I hate that bloke. I'll never like it.
We got 2 red cards in the first half. I think Darlow saved 2.
Darlow saved both penalties, I think, too. Yeah.
I think we went up 1-0 up in the end, but then lost 2-1 from memory or something like that. So there's been some tough games there, but look, I mean, we only played them a few weeks ago, and they, I mean, to be fair, probably should have won 5 or 6 at our round. We got completely destroyed. Yeah, we're rubbish, but at least Big Chris Wood's not there, and that should be prime.
Yeah, so
on the break, but
So he's got a hamstring injury. He's out for could be up to 6 weeks, Jay, which is going to be a massive blow for you guys. Looking at, I guess, your fixtures coming up. You've got us, and then you've got West Ham at home, Villa away, Liverpool at home, and Brighton away. So it's it's a tough set of 5 sort of coming up, and without kind of your main talisman, who's been really well. Like when he's been fit this year, he's actually played really well. So he's a massive loss for you guys.
If I don't laugh, I'll cry. So yeah, I think look, Chris Wood is someone that shocked us, and I think he shocked you guys as well. Not just in terms of not just in terms of that game, but like overall. Because when you sold him, you thought, look at us, we're selling this guy to Forest for it's a complete dud. But he's
15 million. What the hell?
But he's got 8 goals this season. So I can't complain. I think we paid 15 million for him. Okay, I don't think it was a good deal still. But at the same time, you're paying £15 million for a striker that's going to get you 10 goals in a season. I mean, there's clubs that are paying 50 million, 60 million for players, like Richarlison, that only get you 10 goals a season, if that, at times, even though he's doing better now. But look, I think that, Chris Wood's a good player. You've got Taiwo Wanyi back, and Taiwo is really important. 5 goals, 6 goals this season. He's been injured for most of it. He's a really, really good striker when he's on form. He's looked a little bit off it in the last game against Bristol last night. But when he gets back up to speed, I think it'll be dangerous. He's got an opportunity to do it against Newcastle. And the thing is about Newcastle, with all due respect, you don't know what Newcastle you're going to get recently, because you look at Aston Villa, they were stunned by Newcastle. I was in Newcastle watching that game, actually. And, Aston Villa just were battered by them. And although Aston Villa slowly came back into the game, Newcastle kept the win. But, against Luton, started okay, switched off a little bit, and I thought you're going to get battered here, and you came back. So I like the persistence, I like the teamwork in the Newcastle squad, and I like the mentality given the amount of injuries. But at the same time, some of them look fatigued, and some of them look really, really tired. Trippier's kind of just coming back, but he looked knackered recently. So, I'm kind of hoping that Forest catch you out and hope that maybe you are still a bit tired from that Luton game. But you never know. We've had a midweek game as well to think about. So we're going to have some tired legs. But look, it's going to be a good matchup, I think. I think it might be a draw, if I'm being honest with you. But again, it depends, because both teams are like that. You don't know what team you're going to get with both sides. So it's a hard one to predict for me.
All right, Dimi, I'll bring up your team for us, mate. So you've got Wilson up top. Obviously, the injury to Anthony Gordon's still a little bit unknown. We'll probably find out more Friday or tomorrow for the press conference, Eddie's press conference. Craig Hope said it's not serious, so that could mean anything from amputation to like a life-threatening injury. So we don't know what that means. So it's going to be a big ask, I think, for Wilson to come in after sort of 45 minutes and get through a 90. You've got Harvey Barnes starting as well. The biggest one for me, though, mate, is Dan Burn at left back. I'm not sure, you probably haven't sort of covered it off much, Jay, but after the Luton game last week, Dan Burn he may as well have been the second shooter on the grassy knoll, some of the stickies copped this weekend. So Livramento seems to be the one. So, Dimi, are you going to stick fat with Dan, or are you going to sort of bring Livramento in?
It's not that I'm going to stick fat. I think Eddie will stick fat with Dan Burn.
Yeah.
He doesn't like changing a lineup, Eddie, at the best of times, and especially the senior core players who he's trusted and have done a great job for him in the last couple of seasons. He doesn't willy-nilly just make changes. I mean, we all saw what happened against Luton Town. Dan Burn was completely pantsed. It wasn't obviously just his fault. He didn't get any support from the midfield on that side. It wasn't obviously just him, but he was destroyed. And the thing that worries me with this game, it may be a bit different because Forest are going to be at home, but on the break at St James's Park, Alanga was absolutely destroying Dan Burn last game as well, and we really found it difficult to contain Forest on the counter-attack. And it might be a bit different because Forest may have more of the ball and we may reverse roles and play on the counter-attack ourselves. But I would lean towards, if it was me picking the team, picking Tino because of his pace against Alanga and Forest's front line. But I've just got a feeling that Eddie's going to say, look, Burn's done a great job for me. He's played on quick wingers before and done a decent job. He's played against Saka a couple of times and done a really good job. So I think Eddie will stick with him, which may or may not be the right move. We'll see after the game on Saturday night. But, yeah, I think that it could be a a make or break move if Burn gets destroyed again and Elanga has another great performance. Eddie might have some serious talk with Dan Burn. He might have to rip the band-aid off and get him out of the starting 11, but hopefully it doesn't go that way, and we can sort of give Burn a bit more support on that left-hand side.
Yeah, I also think probably Murphy will probably start. I think Barnes' little cameos will probably be for the next few weeks at least until he gets his legs under him and everything like that. So I think Murphy will probably get the start there. So yeah, having said all that, you've given your sort of prediction, Jay. Before I get to yours, Dimi, I guess probably the most important question probably for a Nottingham Forest fan is: do you think they'll stay up this year or not? Forget about the charges and the potential points deductions and everything like that. Assume that everything's going to be not guilty and you guys will be fine. Do you think you've got enough to stay in the league?
Yeah, I back our team every time. I'm not someone that is just a complete pessimist, and I will back Forest to the hill, even if we get the deduction. That's just what a proper fan thinks. And I think we've got the quality to stay up. I think we've got the coach to stay up. He's got no relegations on his resume, so touch wood, he kind of keeps it that way. But yeah, I think we'll stay up. Why not? Got quality, so yeah.
Jimmy, do you think they'll survive
I think they'll be fine. There's a couple of really poor teams, I think, in the league, and pending like a 20-point deduction, which I don't think will come. I think they'll have enough. I think they'll have enough points to, even if they copped a 5-point ban or a 6-point ban, they'll have enough points in the bank that they'll still survive. And I think they probably deserve to survive. Everyone wants to see the old traditional clubs in the Premier League. Nottingham Forest is one of those, and I think most neutral supporters would much rather see Nottingham Forest in the league than potentially one of the yo-yo clubs who just go up and down every second season.
Yeah, well, I know. Like I said earlier, we're 23 games in, so there's still a lot of games to go. But it's shaping up as a really sort of interesting relegation battle. Normally, kind of the start of February, you got maybe two teams look almost certain, and then you might have 2 or 3 others that are kind of fighting or to not be that last team down. But you can probably go as high as Crystal Palace. You throw in Brentford, Forest is in there, Luton, Everton, and Burnley. Like, they're all sort of within 5 points of each other. Like, it's gonna come down. I think Sheffield United are gone already, so it's going to be a really sort of interesting. Not for us, but for the teams. Interested as an onlooker to see which way the cards fall. And I really, really hope that these points deductions that Everton have already copped and potentially could cop again, and if you guys cop one, I hope that's not the determining factor in relegating teams. Because I think, like you said earlier, Jay, if they're going to change the laws next year, it seems really unfair to relegate teams based on that reason. Now, if there was no teams in this situation with the FFP and stuff like that, changing the rules is fine. Like, it doesn't really directly influence any outcomes and stuff like that. But to do it when teams might be a victim of it potentially 2 weeks earlier seems really wrong and unfair.
Yeah, I despise the idea of it, to be honest. But again, it's cards we've been dealt, so let's play it. But for now, we've just got to focus on picking up points and putting ourselves in a position where we can say, hey, look, you take 6 points off us and we should be okay, So that's all that matters. That's all that matters. Yeah.
So, Dimi, get your prediction, mate.
So it's a tough one because we, at the start of the season or for most of the first half of the year, we couldn't perform away from home. We couldn't get a win, and all of a sudden, we've won 3 games in a row away from home, 2 of them in the cup, and now we can't get a result at home, and our home form was impenetrable. But I think it's probably going to be a draw. I mean, we haven't been in great form. Obviously, the Villa game was fantastic and the cup results, but I just don't have the confidence at the moment that we can put 90 minutes together again on the road. I mean, I'd love to be proved wrong, but for me, it's got the hallmarks this game of probably a 1-1 draw. Hopefully, we're not blowing a goal in the last 5 minutes. That'll feel like a loss. But I mean, a point away from home, generally speaking, is not the end of the world. It's just what happened to us last week by on paper, dropping 2 points against Luton is obviously putting more pressure for us on this game to get the win. We had that after that big Villa win. We had Luton Town, Forest, and Bournemouth 3 games in a row. And as a Newcastle fan, you're thinking we can probably get at least 7, probably 9 points from those games. So it puts a lot of pressure on this one to sort of make up for the Luton draw. So hopefully I'm wrong, but yeah, I probably see a draw, a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a Desmond. I think our defending's been shambolic this season, and we've already conceded more goals than we conceded the whole of last year. So it's definitely an issue for us. So I'm going a Desmond 2-2. I think we've got the players who can score, but I also think we've got the players who can concede as well.
Yeah, the way we defended against Forest a couple of weeks ago, I mean, Forest should have scored probably 6. There was a couple, I think Alanga didn't square to Chris Wood at times where he was wide open.
Yeah.
They on the counter-attack, it was pitiful. And even last week against Luton scored 4 and probably had 2 or 3 other counter-attacks that they could have punished us on. I mean, and we could have ended up copying 6 goals at home to Luton Town. That would have been a borderline of disgrace. But not to harp on that game. It's definitely going to be an open game. I don't think it's going to be a 0-0 ball game. Both teams probably can feel confident that they're going to score goals, but again, probably going to leak goals as well. So a draw looks like the most likely result here.
Yeah, perfect. All right, score draw for those. Gamble responsibly, as always. The more you bet, the more you get. So you can do what you like with that. Jamie, thank you very much for jumping on with us tonight, mate. Really, really appreciate your time after a long but successful night last night. For everyone as well, you can catch him on his socials. I'm Jamie Martin on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it as well. And good luck for the rest of the season as well for Nottingham Forest. Like I said earlier, I hope you guys can kind of get through this little shitty spell you're in at the moment. Not so much on the field, more off the field stuff, and everything's good. And you guys are still in the Premier League next year, mate.
No, I appreciate the invite and thank you guys. Good luck with your season. I'll definitely be in Newcastle at some point before the end of the season, so I'm sure I'll be able to watch a game. But good luck, and may the best team win.
Yes, which is going to be a draw, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's 2-2, isn't it? There you go. Done deal.
Awesome. Dimi, thank you very much, mate, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, mate.